Aloha! Welcome to the Live Ukulele podcast. My name is Brad Bordessa, and in this episode, I'm going to talk about something that I'm always repeating, and that is the magic of simplicity, of not getting carried away and doing too many things, studying too many things at once, and instead just really focusing on key aspects instead of stretching yourself so thin. I'm sure I've talked about this in the past in different ways, but I feel like it's important enough to revisit, give it some more time, and to bring to your attention once again. This episode is brought to you by Hawaiian Songs for Ukulele. This is a 5-song collection of Hawaiian classics that you'll learn to play the melody, the chords, learn to sing the olelo, and also how to create solo arrangements for all 5 of these songs. Something that's missing from a lot of ukulele instructional material is a little bit of a push back on giving you everything, right? You want to learn the song, but there are encouragements that can be made to help you learn the song in a more organic way. And Hawaiian Songs for Ukulele tries to do that by encouraging you to learn the song in the steps that makes it easiest, right? Learn the melody by ear if possible, and then there is a tab that you can check yourself on. Or if you really are just wanting to learn the song quickly, you can use the tab. But it's more about the journey, because the melody and the chords and the olelo are all spelled out with video instruction and a nice tab lead sheet. But when you get to the solo arranging, once again, I'm sharing more concepts that will allow you to adapt the song, create a solo arrangement that works for your skill level and for your interpretation. And I've heard back from a lot of students who say that they really appreciate this approach, because the little bit of push, the little bit of challenge of try to do it without looking at the tab, try to just learn the melody by ear at first, they feel like it's really expanded their horizons and their ability to just really interact with the music organically and not need to kind of rely on looking at that piece of paper in order to play the music. If you want to jump in and get started today, you can find the link to Hawaiian Songs for Ukulele in the podcast description, or you can go to liveukulele.com/store. If you use coupon code HYN10, you get 10% off of your purchase. That's HYN and then the number 10 to save a little bit off the top and get started playing some Hawaiian songs in the Hawaiian style and learning them, most importantly, Hawaiian style. Okay, so most of my efforts as a teacher is focusing people to where they need to go. And in the era of the internet, in the era of abundant ukulele resources, whether they be from the internet or from your ukulele club or from your ukulele instructor, you have to be really cautious in that you use your time and your efforts in the most efficient way possible, so that you're not just spreading yourself so thin over a bunch of resources that you never really master, right? Because what you want to be able to do as a musician is to use the tools you have very well, as opposed to having a bunch of tools that you can't use, right? Much more helpful to have somebody who can really operate an impact driver to put screws into a woodworking project, and have somebody who's really good at that, and like, okay, that's your job, than to have somebody who owns all the tools and has no idea how to use any of them, right? That's much less useful. So even if it does feel like an over-specialization, at least you can really utilize those special skills that you have in that one area. And what brought this to my mind is I'm working on redoing my PDF scales collection so that everything is all vector. And I've been working with Claude, so a little bit of AI assistance, full disclosure, to bring the charts that I did many years ago in a big old giant 150 something page PDF, bringing those to become a simplified app that I think is a lot more straightforward to use than a lot of the scale generators that are out there. A lot cleaner to look at, a lot more straightforward, a lot less going on, and it just shows you the information and that's it. And then I'm going to take them all and put them back into a PDF again so that it's rendered out in a nice way, and this, basically the same layout as what I had before, but just using updated vector graphics. So basically having the AI create a little app that creates these vector graphics that can be downloaded. But as I was doing it, I was like revisiting the idea behind having all these scales available. As it is, there's 9 scales on the Scale Finder, in the new version that I'm creating. And that's because those are 9 main sounds, main tonalities, and musical applications that you might want to use a scale in, or to be able to look up a scale like, how does this work? You know, how does it actually go together? And that's great. But there's also additional information that I intentionally hid. All right, and that is the 5 scale modes, the major scale modes: Dorian, Phrygian, Lydian, Mixolydian, Locrian. Because while part of music and a part of theory, I think they're very low on the importance scale. And so when I hid them behind this message. It says, modes and other advanced theory are a poor use of study time for all but the most expert of players. And there's a tick box that says, by accepting, I acknowledge that I already know my main scales inside and out and have a really good reason to study modes. Right? Obviously, I'm kind of being a little bit goofy and, blatantly overbearing on this. But I did want to make the point that this is optional. This is a focus thing, right? You can learn the huge majority of music by knowing just the major scale. If you can know where the note locations are in the major scale, you can easily derive the relative minor, and you can make adjustments as you go. If you really need a scale that changes something or moves, you can just adjust those notes and you get the rest of the scales out of the main major scale. But if you're like an advanced intermediate player and you're learning your scales and you kind of have a grasp on some major scales and you sort of know how the relative minor works, you definitely should not be sitting down and saying, okay, now I'm going to learn the modes. Absolutely not important. There's a million other things that you could be doing that would better serve your time. Because all the modes do is explain a sound. That's all it does. And having that in your bag is not going to help you make good sounding music. It might help push you towards a sound if you've never heard it before. But for the most part, this goes back to owning every tool in the hardware store and not knowing how to use any of it. Because in order to utilize these scale modes, and if you're not familiar, basically a scale mode is one of the scale tones. So you have in the key of C, C, D, E, F, G, A, B, C in your major scale, do, re, mi, fa, sol, la, ti, do. And if you put a number on each of those, you have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and then you go back to the 1, which is the root. So in the case of a C major scale, you're playing from the 1, the root, C, do, re, mi, fa, sol, la, ti, do, back to the 1. But with a mode, you are shifting that and offsetting it so that the scale starts and ends on a different note, but the internal scale notes remain the same. So for like a Dorian scale, you start on the 2. So D Dorian comes from C major, played from D, do, re, mi, fa, sol, la, ti, do, re, right back to the 2 all the way up. But it's the same C major scale. But in context, it gives you a specific sound. So those are modes. But if you haven't spent time really learning how to play just a C major scale and how to use it, right? You have to use this stuff in order for it to sound good. If you're not sure how to play melodies by ear, or how knowing that scale could help you hone in on which melody notes you want to try first to find them faster when you're playing something by ear. If you haven't done that, if you haven't spent time improvising to learn to use the notes in a way that is expressive and uses phrasing and uses interesting rhythms and motifs and different movements, those things are more inherently musical than, here, these notes are a Dorian mode. Like, that doesn't give you much information. Does not give you much information. It's just like a color on the palette. Having the color doesn't mean you can paint something that looks any kind of decent, right? It's just one little thing in the tool bag, and there's so much else that can be more important. So I think it all comes back to the fact that music is generally kind of misunderstood by students of the ukulele, because it's infinitely complex. You can do anything with music, and really the sky is the limit, and the only limitation is your creativity and your technical skill in order to express something. But many people get off track when they start to think that by adding complexity, you're adding quality to the music that you play. And that, in my experience, is definitely not the case. It's way better to be able to add quality to the music with a narrower focus. If I say, okay, musical dynamics, the loudness or softness that you play a phrase or a section of a song or an entire song, right? Dynamics. Piano, forte. Piano is musical term for quiet. Forte is musical term for loud. That's a simple concept, but no one uses it. Very few people come out of the box and they play songs using dynamics as an expression tool. Even though it's this very simple thing that is obviously very musical, people are like, well, how do I implement the Phrygian mode into this song? It's like, it doesn't matter. You're not playing with dynamics first. Like, dynamics will take your song way further than some funky scale ever would that you have to ask about. Things like dynamics, once they're pointed out to you, a lot of times it's like, oh yeah, duh, that's why that sounds a certain way. Or working on getting your phrasing together for your solos. Like, you don't just want to play a bunch of notes, blah, 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 blah. That doesn't do anything musically. But if you have a phrase and it's like I'm talking, where I'm leaving some space here and I'm leaving some space here, and I have an inflection in my voice that helps me portray the subject that I'm talking about, that same phrasing that we're familiar with for language, spoken language, is something that can be applied to music. And nobody does that either, right? And, I don't literally mean nobody, but very few people do that automatically when there's a whole lot of mileage to be gained from those things, as opposed to obscure and obtuse music theory. Teach me the circle of fifths. It's like, can you play with dynamics first? Have you ever thought about phrasing? Like, let's start with these aspects that are so core to getting some sort of musical expression across before you start looking at that other stuff. Like, that other stuff can be useful. It can help some minds wrap their head around a concept. But, modes and the circle of fifths don't make good music. It explains how good music is made, but it has to be already good music. And you can create that good music by leveraging more simple, focused aspects of your toolbox. Dynamics, tone, phrasing, timing, rhythm. Like, hardly anybody has good timing out of the box. Nobody practices timing. So this is a call for all of you out there to realistically assess what you're working on and ask yourself, is this just some goose chase, or is this actually an aspect of music that's going to give me, obvious and tangible results with minimal effort? If you haven't spent time playing with dynamics or tone or timing, certainly those three, you should, way before you go looking for the circle of fifths or modes or lots of other stuff that is, less impactful, right? 80-20 rule. Do 20% of the work to get 80% of the results. If you haven't explored dynamics, tone, timing, but you're focusing on some, real nitty-gritty detail that's not going to lend itself to your music sounding better, what are you doing? Take a step back, reassess, and try and decide, is this moving me forward in a meaningful way? And a lot of times an ukulele teacher can help you make that judgment call. This is where you start to separate out the mediocre ukulele teachers, because they will not have a strong idea of an objective idea of which of these aspects is important or not, and where to focus your time. And if they just go along with everything, circle of fifths, that's cool, let's learn that. You got to have a reason to learn something. It needs to do something for you before it should be in your to-do list of things to learn. Because there's all kinds of things you can learn that will do things for you in music. So beware the ukulele teacher that just goes with the flow and will teach you anything you ask about. It's a fine line, because as an ukulele teacher, you're trying to be encouraging and you're trying to guide the student down the path of most productivity, right? If I have a student who has terrible timing and they're asking me let's learn to play this fancy thing or that fancy thing, my job is to identify the problem and then help them fix that. And if I'm identifying as okay, timing is the problem, period, end of story, I need to find a way to guide them towards, no, timing is the problem. And if you can fix your timing, you're going to sound way better than if we spent time looking at that other thing. But if the teacher's not willing to push back on that, then, you might end up spending a bunch of time on something that's less useful than you really got to just fix your timing first. And it's tricky because students are paying the teacher, and, depending on what the student wants, some students just want encouragement. Some students just want some company. They just want to bounce some ideas around. Some students really want to go. They want to put the pedal to the metal and do the hard work and get the most progress possible out of their time. And that's where, as the teacher, you got to push back. Okay, you want to haul ass? Great, let's do it. But in order to do that, we need to address this, this, and this. These are your weakest things. If you can fix those, you're going to take them with you forever. And everything down the road that we work on is going to go way faster because you have fixed the core underlying problems. But not everybody wants that. That's something you got to kind of feel out. And as the student, you kind of have to decide, am I looking for challenge? Am I looking for pushback? Do I want to have a teacher who's just going to teach me everything that I ask about? Or do I want to have a teacher who's going to steer me towards things that are more important to be focusing my time on? It's tricky. There's a lot in there. But bottom line is, you should be focusing on things that are going to get you more progress in a shorter amount of time. And be more musical about it, right? Like I said, this mode stuff and the circle of fifths, those are two super obvious ones to pick on. But they don't contain much music in and of themselves. They might be inspiring in a way because you try something that you otherwise wouldn't think to try. That's good. But your timing's got to be really good. Your tone should be pretty good. Your phrasing should be coming along and developing. All this stuff should happen first, in my opinion, right? That's what this podcast is for. It's for me to share my opinion. It's not the law, but in my experience, it's a hindrance if you get too stuck in the swamp of, oh, let's try this little obscure thing. Let's try this little obscure thing. Like, most students need to be bang down the middle of the bell curve of, here are the most useful musical things we can be working on to get you playing music that sounds good. If you're determined to work on something that is, just an exercise, kind of a theoretical mind exercise, it's not going to make you sound as good as spending a whole week examining your finger positioning so that you get a better tone as you pick, right? Am I hooking the string? Am I picking from way above the string? Am I picking from way below the string? Am I picking in the middle of the string? Am I picking on the bridge side of the string? What is the angle of my finger rotationally around the axis of the string? What about rotationally around the string up and down, across my belly button? There's so many different little things that you could spend with spend your time working on that would actually make you sound way better. Because then everything that you play is going to have good tone because you spent time to knock that off the to-do list. Okay, tone, check, sounds good when I play. Like, maybe the notes, I'm not confident in my notes or my phrasing or my timing, but when I pick a note, it sounds big, it sounds round, it sounds fat, like it has a nice tone to it. Wow, that's some major progress, in my opinion. I think that's, as somebody who spent a lot of time pursuing that and look back and appreciate that I pursued that, like, yeah, duh, that's like a really good place to focus. It's a simple thing, but if you can nail it, if you can really get it down, then everything you do is going to sound better. Everything, not just some obscure scale that you use for one measure across this one funny chord in a song. Like, that's okay if you're really advanced and you know how to implement that and you're studying things specifically. But at that point, your tone should already be there. And if it's not, take a step back and find those simpler things that will get you more progress. Because here's the thing. Music is made up of all these little tiny aspects. Tiny and important aspects, as opposed to tiny and insignificant, like the random things you might be studying that I've been talking about. But these tiny, important aspects that all come together to create a great thing. So my partner and I went to see the Hadestown film this weekend. It's a Broadway musical, won a bunch of Tonys, and it's fabulous. The show itself is fabulous. Filming aside of how you figure out how to film a Broadway show or a West End show aside, the show itself is fantastic. Great songs, great singing, great staging, great vibe, great story. Like, the whole thing just slaps. It was great all the way through. Contrast that to Wicked. I've not seen the Broadway version of Wicked, but my impression is that, they made the movies after that. And the movies, in my opinion, were much ado about not a whole lot. Like, there's one really good song. There's a second song that's like sort of memorable, but like a lot of it's met, and then it has this one really good song. I enjoyed Hadestown more. Not that there was one song in Hadestown that jumped out quite that much, but overall, all the parts working together felt like it was more quality. Like, as a production, as a thing, as an art piece, it felt like it was a lot higher quality because there were more pieces that were working well and highly tuned than just having kind of this scattered whatever and one really good song. Kind of different things, but it comes back to just like quality on as many different fronts as you can possibly get it, and keep it simple. It's nothing super fancy, right? They're not diving around the stage. There's not crazy acrobatics. They're not singing, amazing, crazy opera pieces. I mean, the singing's really good in Hadestown. Of course, it's a musical. But there's not a lot to it. Like, just it's simple in a way. Like, of course, it's a very complex production to make that happen, and so many people involved to get it out the door. But it's the simple stuff that works, right? It's just like it's enjoyable because it's simple and highly refined. And it's the same, I don't know. Maybe I'm just getting off on a tangent, but like, to me, that's enjoyable, is when you take something and you simplify it so that it's even better. It's found a better version because it's more finely tuned. It's like having 10 knives in your kitchen that all do a little bit different thing, or having one really good knife. Like, I would so much rather have one really good knife or one really good ukulele that just does all the stuff. That same kind of thing as like these musical skills, is if you can have just a few things that really leverage the music to make it sound good, then you're going to be in really good shape. It's a great foundation to be building from. And then once you have those things, you can go off in the weeds and explore different stuff. But anyways, I'll wrap it up here so I don't ramble anymore. But that's something that I'm always pushing back on, is obscure little things. Like, no, focus on the important stuff, the simple things that really will make a big difference. And I think you'll find that you go faster, and while your music might not be flashy and fancy, even a simple thing is going to sound good. If you just pick a single note melody, happy birthday. I would much rather listen to somebody play happy birthday with good tone, good phrasing, good dynamics, all that kind of stuff, than somebody who plays some sort of a fancy song and doesn't have any of those things. Because at that point, it's just kind of painful on your ears, because those aspects are so important. If you don't have them, you don't have anything. And so if happy birthday can beat the, quote, fancy song, what's the point, right? Just play happy birthday and get that really dialed in and make it sound good. Music is supposed to sound good. All right. Thanks for tuning in. If you like what you hear, please subscribe to the podcast, share it, tell your friends, tell your ukulele club. New episodes come out on the first Saturday of every month. If you want to support what I do, please go to liveukulele.com/store. Check out my lessons over there. That is the best content that I create. All my ebooks and video courses. And I hope to see you here next time. Thanks for tuning in. And until then, be well, peace, Afro beats, ahui ho.